The predecessor to the RSB was the Institute of Biology, and the biologist was just biologist. In September 1994, I wrote this article. Now, nearly 30 years later, I'm revisiting the topic. A search for the Hyrax will tell you that it's a small herbivorous mammal, also a piece of dental equipment, and even an armored vehicle. This talk is about the first one. First, let me tell you how I got to be interested in this animal, and it starts with my birthplace, a somewhat chance discussion, and my first postdoctoral job. The story starts in Chapel-in-le-Frith, a small town in Derbyshire, England, and involves Brian Heap, a past president of the Institute of Biology. Even though I was born here and Brian lived here, about 500 meters away, and we attended the same schools, our paths did not cross until nearly 30 years later. From 1969 to 1973, I was in Newcastle upon Tyne in England for my BSc in Honours, before starting on a postgraduate program at the University of Florida. My work there was in reproductive physiology and endocrinology of cattle and included work on the effects of heat stress. In 1979, Brian Heap, then working in Cambridge, came to give a lecture as a distinguished scientist. At a small get-together after his lecture, we met. We were just two Brits in a sea of Americans, and we discovered our common geographical and educational link. When I told Brian that I was interested in tropical agriculture, he offered me a suggestion. He'd just spent several months at the University of Nairobi in Kenya as a visiting scholar and suggested that I write to them. So I wrote to them in November 1979 and received a response in June 1980, which was a telegram offering me a job. 2 months later, we were in Nairobi, me as a lecturer in the Department of Veterinary Physiology, and my wife as a researcher in the Chicago Institute of Comparative Endocrinology. Let me just now step back 1 year. In 1979, the World Health Organization's Special Program in Human Reproduction started supporting research in 3 organizations in Kenya. First, the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Kenyatta Hospital. Second, the Institute of Primate Research within the National Museums of Kenya. And thirdly, the University of Nairobi's Department of Veterinary or Animal Physiology. Their roles were to undertake studies in humans, non-human primates, and non-primates, respectively. It was there in veterinary physiology that I had my first encounter with the Hyrax. And then although I left that department in 1982 to join the Institute of Primate Research for 10 years, I continued my interest, even co-authoring this monograph here, supported by UNESCO funding. Any general text on Hyraxes or Hyraxes will state that they're small, short-tailed animals, and then present the amazing fact that the Hyrax is classified with the sea cows, the elephant, and the aardvark in the superorder Peningulata. Our word Hyrax is derived from the Greek word meaning shrew, and the Bible refers to them as both the coney and the rabbit. South African settlers called it the dassie, klipdas, or badger, and back in 1780, Storr gave it the name Procavia capensis, implying an association with the guinea pig, Cavia porcellus. I'm going to provide a little detail about some of the most interesting aspects for topics listed here. It's worth pointing out now that some studies are from the wild and others from captive populations. Caution also always needs to be made in extrapolating the wild situation from captive observations. To demonstrate this, I'm going to refer to a paper I did with Paula Kahumbu, then a student, but now the CEO of Wildlife Direct. We studied the dental profile of 150 wild baboons in the Pump House Gang, a baboon troop that has been featured in many articles and films. The troop had been observed daily for 15 years, and each animal's exact age was known. What we determined is that age in wild animals differed by 1 year by the age of 5 when compared to data derived from captive animals. Let's go back to the appearance of the Hyrax. Their colour varies both within and among animals of the same species, and therefore cannot be used as a sole criterion for subspecies separation. Their thick furry coats contain long sensory tactile hairs or vibrissae. Now, many mammalian species have tactile hairs on their heads, for example cats. However, Hyraxes are the only terrestrial mammals with a body-wide distribution of these hairs. Hyraxes back into their holes and crevices, and the vibrissae covering the Hyrax body presumably facilitates navigation when visual cues are limited. On the back of the Hyrax is a patch of different coloured hair to the rest of the body. This dorsal patch covers an oval area of skin containing a small gland. The gland, whose histology varies with maturity and sexual activity, emits a musky secretion, which is assumed to have functions of sexual attraction, territorial marking, and mother-young bonding. More glandular tissue is found under the hair tufts above the eyes, and also under another tuft located on the chin. The feet are interesting. The front feet have 5 digits and the back 4. All toes have short, flat nails, except for the second digit of the hind feet, which, like those in prosimians, has a long, curved claw used for grooming. The soles are pliant, rubbery pads, which assist in a strong grip for climbing. The muscles form a hollow that is a suction cup to facilitate climbing. The feet are the only part of the body with sweat glands, which improve the traction between the foot pads and the rocks in which they live. The dentition of the Hyrax is unusual, as only the second incisors are retained in the upper jaw. These triangular teeth grow continuously and serve as canine-like tusks used for display and defense. They are perpetually honed by the action of the lowest second incisor. The first incisors are retained in the lower jaw, where all 4 incisors bear serrated cutting edges and are used as a comb by the animal. There are no canine teeth. A diastema, a gap, separates the incisors from the 4 premolars and the 3 molars. The upper cheek teeth have been likened to the teeth of the rhinoceros by forming a cutting and grinding surface with the lower cheek teeth, also to the horse and having ridged molars, and to the hippopotamus because of the musculature of the jaw. The last external anatomical peculiarity of the Hyrax that I will mention is that they have 2 pairs of inguinal and 1 pair of pectoral mammary glands. By comparison, those of the elephant and dugong are pectoral and the aardvark inguinal. Contrast these with the udder in ruminants, for example cows and goats, and the line of teats of other animals, for example dogs and cats. Hyracoidea are an order with only 1 extant family, Procavidae, in the clade Paenungulata, which groups 4 mammalian orders listed here on the slide. Much has been made of the relationships among these orders, and especially between the elephant and the Hyrax, because of the great size difference. The elephant is the largest land mammal, while the Hyrax is about the size of a rabbit. Although there are questionable similarities among the orders of Penungulata, the relationship is not as close as popularly believed. Thus, the discussion will no doubt continue, but perhaps Hyraxes, elephants, sea cows, and aardvarks are each best considered unique. It's now generally accepted that there are three genera: Procavia, Heterohyrax, and Dendrohyrax, separated by anatomical, physiological, and behavioral differences. However, debate still resides in whether the bush hyrax, Heterohyrax, is a subgenus of either the rock hyrax, Procavia, or the tree hyrax, Dendrohyrax, or a genus in its own right. The common view is that the tree hyrax, Dendrohyrax, has three species: western, southern, and eastern, and the rock hyrax, Procavia, and the bush hyrax, Heterohyrax, each one species. And there are up to 100 subspecies across the genera that have been reported. Procavia are the most widely distributed and found particularly in hot, arid regions, although one race inhabits Mount Kenya at altitudes up to 4,500 meters, where temperatures often fall below freezing. Heterohyrax are more prevalent in the forested and less arid regions of East and Central Africa, and Dendrohyrax occupy a band across the center of the continent from coast to coast, including high elevations in the Ruwenzori Mountains in Uganda. As a rule of thumb, Procavia and Heterohyrax, bush hyrax, are both gregarious, living in groups of up to 60 animals among rocky outcrops, the kopjes. The more nocturnal, solitary Dendrohyrax are found in wooded areas. But regardless of their relationship to each other, they're very difficult to tell apart. So is habitat a good means of identification? Judith Rudnai, who wrote popular articles about the hyrax, including her pet ones, posed this question and concluded that, as always with the hyrax, you cannot be quite sure. Communication among hyraxes may be visual, olfactory, tactile, or auditory. Vocalization is undoubtedly an important method, and loud vocalizations of hyraxes are aided by a guttural pouch in the eustachian canal. Vocalizations were used to identify a new species of tree hyrax living in West Africa and confirmed by comparison of mitochondrial genomes. These animals here are distinct subspecies from those and those, all of which are the same. Just listen to the variety of sounds over the next 30 seconds or so. Turning now to reproduction, it's actually rather surprising that there really isn't a lot of information about this. Comparison of Procavia and Heterohyrax showed that while male internal genitalia are similar, there are major external differences in that the preputial anal distance in Procavia here is 22 millimeters, whereas in the Heterohyrax, it was 64 millimeters. Penis length has also been identified to be different. And these two anatomical features can support in identification, but do depend on catching the animal first and turning it over. Hyracordia are true testiconda. That is, their testes are intra-abdominal throughout their entire life. This anatomical situation, although not uncommon among mammals, has always posed a question in terms of thermoregulation of temperature-sensitive spermatozoa. There's nothing too remarkable about the female reproductive anatomy, although, again, description is entirely limited to a couple of papers. Similarities in the anatomy of the female tract between the Hyrax and the elephant have been noted, but in fact there are major differences. Away from equatorial areas, there's a definite breeding season corresponding not to the highly variable temperature or rainfall, but to photoperiodic keying. Birth peaks occur in the spring, suggesting that Hyrax is a short-day breeder, with mating occurring after photoperiod decrease, triggering hormonal changes. In equatorial Kenya, Hyraxes are found in a pregnant state at all times of the year, with a birth peak of about 2 months duration for different areas. The breeding season may be keyed to several combined factors, such as photoperiod, temperature, and rainfall. During the non-breeding season, there's an intermingling of both sexes in colonies. However, during the breeding season, Hyrax colonies are comprised of groups, each with a dominant male, a harem of females and young. All other males are relegated to the bachelor herds. Seasonal reproduction in mammals is common, for example in sheep, which are also short-day breeders. And the rams exhibit seasonality in testosterone concentration and ejaculate volume, but not in testis weight. Hyrax increase in testis weight, shown here, is more reminiscent of birds and reptiles. I don't propose to spend much time in this area of hormonal control because there are very little data to talk about. But what I will say is that the indication of the stage of the cycle is really beneficial for studies. I worked at the Institute of Primate Research for 10 years, and the stage of the cycles for more than 60 baboons were recorded every single day. No such external signs are evident in the Hyrax, as Hyrax exhibition of estrus is confined to behavior. In the animal physiology department in Nairobi, Samson Gombe determined histologically through vaginal lavage that cycle length in the Hyrax was 13 days. And Chiranjit Bambra, a master's student, demonstrated the existence of a Hyrax chorionic gonadotrophin, similar to human chorionic gonadotrophin. As you'll know, human CG is the hormone produced by the placenta in pregnancy, which maintains the corpus luteum. The finding that the Hyrax produced CG led to the suggestion that the Hyrax may be the suitable model for human reproduction. And that's why WHO were funding that group. A small colony of Hyrax were being established. However, maintaining them in captivity within the constraints of the university system proved too complicated, and the work ceased. Where reproduction in the Hyrax gets really interesting is with the gestation period, which is unusually long for such a small mammal. The blue dot on this figure indicates the deviation of the Hyrax from the norm when body mass and gestation period are plotted. A figure of close to 7 months is generally accepted. The length of gestation and the large litter weight, which can be up to 30% of maternal weight, has prompted speculation that the predecessors of modern Hyraxes were much larger. Litter size vary, but a compilation of reported sizes from nearly 300 litters in regions across Africa revealed a mean of 2.54, with a range of 1 to 6. Following birth, establishment of the mother-young bond is rapid. It begins with the licking of the young immediately following the birth and is soon followed by the offspring climbing onto the mother's back. Here, the pup comes in contact with the dorsal gland where the bond is presumably strengthened by scent. The precocious young who are born with their eyes open associate with other adults very quickly and climb on their backs as well. Suckling carries on for about 3 months. At weaning, the young are fully independent. In fact, they begin to eat solid food as early as 1 day after birth. If nutrition is good, sexual maturity has been reportedly achieved in 1 year in captivity, but more likely to be 2 in the wild. Hyraxes use the sun, rocks, crevices, plus posture and huddling to achieve their desired temperature in a manner not unlike non-homeothermic vertebrates such as reptiles. The goal of conserving energy to thermoregulate is further assisted by a labile body temperature which accepts hypo and hypothermia as normal daily conditions. Physiological processes such as shivering, vasoconstriction and dilation, panting and sweating have been shown in the laboratory, but these mechanisms drain energy supplies when used to keep the body warm and use water when used to keep the body cool, and they're probably reserved for times when behavioral means fail. I think we conclude in saying that the Hyrax are in fact adept at thermoregulation with a minimum of energy expenditure. In the natural habitat, by selection of the thermal environment and by enjoying some degree of thermolability, the animals can reduce their dependence upon physiological mechanisms. As a consequence, thermoregulation and daily activity are closely linked. Activity is governed for the most part by the combination of these climatic conditions, food requirements, and sexual behavior. Although perhaps an overly high estimate, John Sayles calculated that 95% of all time spent outside of the hole was inactive. And apart from brief periods of group feeding, animals were found to be basking, huddling, sitting, or lying. Typically at dawn, the animals emerge from crevices in which they have spent the night and lay broadside to the sun. And John Sayles measured a rise in body temperature in a 3-month-old Heterohyrax from 33 C at 6:30 in the morning when the animal emerged from the hole to 39 at 9 o'clock. Animals huddle and heap. In this manner, the Hyraxes warm themselves without losing heat to the cold rocks. In colder climes, such as up to 4,000 meters on Mount Kenya, where I took this photograph, huddling can take a long time. However, as the air and the rocks begin to warm, the animals spread out. They stretch and sprawl, thereby presenting a large surface area to the sun. Once body temperature is raised sufficiently, feeding begins. And then as air temperatures continue to rise, the animals seek shade before emerging again in the evening for another rapid feeding session and basking. All species of Hyrax are herbivores, with a diet consisting mostly of leaves, twigs, grasses, and fruit, depending on availability. Feeding bouts are quick, and Hyraxes look rather clumsy when they're feeding because they turn their heads sideways and bite off material with the premolar and molar teeth. The incisors play no role in feeding. The teeth of the Hyrax aid in the intake of large amounts of food quickly. The number of teeth presented enable a considerable amount of food to be ingested at each bite. The molarized premolars give a large grinding surface and for a quick ingestion and swallowing of food. It has been calculated that the ratio of body weight in kilograms to the centimeter of cutting edge of the cheek teeth is 1:1 in the Hyrax. This compares to 26:1 for sheep and 100:1 for cattle. And this phenomenon must play a significant role in enabling Hyraxes to ingest large quantities of food in the brief periods of foraging in the morning and early afternoon. Early reports suggested that the Hyrax chewed the cud, and this observation gave credibility to supposed ruminant status. These thoughts probably stem from biblical references. Leviticus said, and the coney, because he cheweth the cud, but divided not the hoof, he is unclean to you. However, more recent studies indicate that the likelihood of Hyraxes ruminating is doubtful. The GI tract bears comparison with both simple and complex stomached mammals and birds. The large stomach is compartmentalized into a non-glandular cranial and the glandular caudal sections. The former acts as a food reservoir, almost similar to the crop of a fowl, and the one distal, similar to that of many mammalian species. The paired ceca are common characteristics of birds and some reptiles. Certain structures are only observed in mammals such as the Hyrax and a few species like anteaters, sloths, and armadillos. 3 areas of the Hyrax gut, specifically the cranial half of the stomach, the mid-gut sacculation, and the paired ceca, all meet the criteria for microbial fermentation. They're thus hindgut fermenters like lagomorphs and rodents. Rapid feeding time, their group behavior, and the close proximity to hiding places provide Hyraxes with a reasonably effective strategy for reducing predation. Nevertheless, predators of Hyrax are quite numerous, as would be expected for such a small animal in a land of large carnivores. Snakes, cats, birds, dogs, jackals, monitor lizards, and baboons have all been listed as known predators. The black eagle, in some locations such as the Matobo Hills in Zimbabwe, relies almost entirely on Hyrax for its diet. In one study, 1,748 items of prey found in or under black eagle nests, 1,715, that's 98%, were of Hyrax. Perhaps not unexpectedly, man is also a predator, and in some locations Hyraxes are hunted for their pelts and flesh. Dassies better eaten than beaten, and the dassie as a new source of protein and revenue featured in the Farmers Weekly back in 1967. And currently there's a company called Venisons in South Africa who sell game meat, and dassie is one of their products. Raising captive Hyrax as a food source has been discussed. In fact, Hyrax were posed as micro livestock by the National Research Council. Animals such as guinea pigs, rats, koipu, and rabbits are included as micro livestock. And I was asked to write a chapter. When I brought it to the attention of the editors that Hyrax gestation period of 7 months would probably preclude a promising economic future, they dropped the idea. In many areas, the clearing of land and the reduction of potential predators allowed Hyrax numbers to increase. Crop damage is reported as competition with sheep for pasture land. In Namibia, reduction in the main predator, the jackal, resulted in Hyrax populations increasing to the point where they were accused of competing with sheep for grazing. However, the conflict was probably over-exaggerated, and dassies probably only affected 1 to 2% of profits. Control measures would have been much more expensive. Similarly, in South Africa, reduction in the number of caracals by farmers was seen to be a major cause of the Hyrax population increase. In an attempt to reduce the Hyrax population, a scheme was developed to market dassie skins in New York and London. However, the market was glutted with marmot skills and the scheme was unsuccessful. Certainly in many areas, the reduction of potential predators allowed Hyrax numbers to increase, leading to the use of culverts as dwelling places around human population. In Israel, where areas have been cleared for orchards, the dumped rocks create an ideal habitat for Hyrax next to the fruit trees. Obvious consequences is damage to trees by Hyrax, who eat the leaves and also break the branches and stems when they walk on them. Another consequence of animals coming into close proximity to humans is that of zoonoses. Hyraxes have been shown to be a reservoir for a number of zoonotic diseases, including leishmaniasis, a particularly nasty disease transmitted by sandfly. Animals do benefit from closer human contact, and the rubbish dumps around settlements are an ideal source of food. I'll just tell you a little story about Amboseli Park in Kenya, where this was getting so out of hand. The dumping of the garbage from the lodges resulted in free-for-all between numerous animals such as hyena, baboons, and marabou storks. And in an intervention led by myself, we encouraged one lodge to build an incinerator, and this was duplicated by other lodges. The advantage to the animals of human contact was also evident in our paper on the Pump House gang and its two splinter groups. These animals became so problematic that they were in danger of being culled. As they'd been studied for close to 20 years and were a valuable research resource, permission was granted to move all 150 animals if a suitable location could be found. Fortunately, a large property in the north of Kenya agreed to take them, and we trapped all of them. We took advantage of the capture to undertake research on dentition, which is what I talked about before, and on body condition and parasitic load. Observations had shown that provisioned animals spent less time foraging and more time resting or socializing. The data we collected confirmed that their overall health was better and suggesting higher availability and quality of diet from eating the garbage around human habitation. Back to the Hyrax. Hyrax is managed with very little water under the conditions of their arid environment. Their low metabolic rate and efficient renal concentration ability enable many, if not most, of their requirements to be met by the water content of the food. But as a result of this, Hyrax urine is highly concentrated and contains many salts. Hyraxes have communal toilets which result in deposits of either a black-brown pitch-like material, which in sites protected from the rain, called Hyraceum, or a white crystalline product where the soluble salts are leached. The latter is sold under the name gassy piss, whereas the mixture of urine and feces is called clipsqueak or Hyraceum, and is used as a variety of to cure a variety of complaints, such as kidney and bladder complaints. The material is also dissolved in alcohol and used in perfumes and traditional medicines. Hyraceum perfumes are quite expensive. Most perfumers call it African stone, and the apothecary's garden who sell African stone state, upon inhalation, one will discover notes of castoreum, deer musk, leather, tobacco, and some of the subtle floral notes of aged civet tincture. A number of studies have used these Hyrax middens for paleo and environmental work in the desert regions in southern Africa in particular. These 20,000-year-old Hyrax middens have been shown to be good indicators of environmental change using radioisotopic methods on the pollen that is extracted. And with that, I'll finish the presentation and just show you a short video courtesy of IBVM Sky Animals.